Beneath the noise, beyond our differences, there are roots that intertwine us. We are the human community.
Wandering in the woods. Sometimes, when wandering in the woods, I hear the mantra of the trees, that steady, pulsing breath, the quiet, rhythmic humming. I find walking in the woods like being on retreat, just me and the trees and the vastness of the cosmos. First, the thoughts are busy, snowballing one after the other, captivating as hell. Then their allure begins to fade, and the mind relaxes back. That's when the magic arrives. The trees appear so much brighter, and the birdsong takes on meaning. I start to taste the grandeur all around. The busyness of human life can easily dull our senses, and I find myself alive again amongst the trees and rocks. This is meditation in motion, a state of flow in being where separateness can fade and we recognize our place again in the web of all creation.
Hi everyone, I'm Toria with the Human Community. We have a special episode today, but before we begin, I'd like to dedicate this episode to the memory of Krishna Peter Perry. Krishna Peter was a beloved teacher of mine, a healer and co-founder of the Shiva Shakti School of Yoga and Healing Arts. He devoted his life to sharing the wisdom traditions of yoga and inspiring others to live with great awareness, compassion, and connection. As one of the many students whose life was enriched by his teachings, I am deeply grateful for his wisdom, kindness, and compassion he shared so generously. His legacy continues to live on through the countless people he inspired, including our guest today, Aiyana and their daughter, Lalita. It is my honor to dedicate this conversation to his memory. And now I am excited to welcome Aiyana Athenian and her lovely daughter, Lalita, to the Human Community. Aiyana has devoted her life to helping others deepen their connection to self through the wisdom traditions of yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, and shamanic healing. For decades, she has studied and taught practices from around the world, believing that true healing happens when we nurture the body, mind, and spirit as one. At the heart of her work, it is the belief that there is no greater gift than guiding others towards a deeper understanding of themselves, sharing timeless wisdom, and inspiring them to live with greater presence and compassion. For Aiyana, spirituality is something we carry into every aspect of our lives and express through the way we care for ourselves, for one another, and the world around us. I've had the privilege of learning from Aiyana in several of her classes, and I am grateful to call her both a teacher and a friend. In today's conversation, we're exploring the profound relationship between humans and the natural world, how nature can become a teacher, a guide, and a source of healing during life's most difficult seasons. And later in the episode, we'll also be joined by Aiyana's daughter, Lalita, known on the hiking trail as PJ, who shares her story and love of hiking in nature and the joy that she has found documenting her adventures along the way. Please join me in welcoming Aiyana and Lalita to the Human Community. Hello, Aiyana. Welcome.
Hi, Toria. So great to be here with you today.
It is so good to see you. So good to see you, my friend.
So good to see you too.
Well, I just introduced you to everybody. So go ahead and jump in and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I came to the spiritual path in my teens. I began a holistic martial arts program in my early teens that involved meditation and the internal martial arts of Qigong and Tai Chi and so on, and then all different forms of martial arts. And, we meditated, we spent a lot of time on these wilderness trips. And I felt like that was really the start to my spiritual path. I was very dedicated to that path for about 6 years, and it got me started with meditation and exploration and the whole mind body spirit connection. And then I came to yoga in my early 20s. I took my first yoga class, probably 20-ish, 19 or 20 or so. And then, that began like a multi-decade long study of yoga, which involved going to India multiple times to study and studying at different places around the world. And then similar around that same time, I went on my first 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat while in Nepal in my early 20s. And I've continued with a daily meditation practice ever since, not necessarily always Vipassana, but that was my starting point. And so then have
Beautiful.
continued with Qigong studies through the years, yoga studies, and then also in kind of mid-20s began on the healing arts path by first going to massage school and studying massage and shiatsu, which I practiced as professional offering for a good decade or so, and then also adding in Ayurvedic studies and becoming an Ayurvedic practitioner. And then more recently, like in the last 6 or 7 years, have begun these shamanic studies and am now a shamanic practitioner. So they've all continued to weave together and inform one another and inspire me.
That is fabulous. I just did an episode with JC
Yes.
Safa from the shamanic school that you and I went to, and you said that
Yes.
you've taken a class with him before as well.
He's been one of my teachers. Yes, he's great.
Yes. And I have had the blessing of having you and Krishna Peter as my teachers. So I'm so grateful for that. I took your yoga nidra class and your pranayama and meditation class, and they are fabulous, fabulous.
Mhm.
So
Good,
grateful
good.
for
Yes.
those teachings. Let's go back to, because today, we're obviously talking about nature. And when I was reading your bio, I didn't realize that you grew up in Maine. So your bio says that you grew up on an off grid homestead in Maine, playing under
Yes.
the pine trees and in the open fields. How did growing up in Maine, playing in the pine trees and the open fields, how did that childhood shape the mother and the teacher that you've become?
It absolutely shaped me in so many ways. And I offer such gratitude to my parents for bringing me up that way. Um, yeah, we grew up in this little off-grid cabin in Maine, and it was a very like slow time, simple lifestyle. And I felt like that was so helpful as a young person for giving me grounding and connecting me with the natural world. I mean, my parents built their own log cabin and
Wow.
grew many of the, much of the food we ate and, planted by the cycles of the moon and the stars and whatnot. And it was beautiful to grow up with that exposure and to grow up comfortable in the natural world. And I think that's the key, is that when we grow up being exposed to nature regularly, we feel a sense of ease with it. And it's not that we can't develop that later. I think we
Yeah.
absolutely can. But I'm really grateful that I did grow up with that, because it's a place that I have felt throughout my whole life that I can always go to nature when I need solace or
Mm.
when I want to recharge or reconnect and so on. So that's absolutely shaped my teaching and my parenting, because I believe those same principles are still so important today. It hasn't changed. I mean, I may not be living in an off grid homestead any longer. We do
Right.
have electricity and whatnot. But that nature connection, I feel, is really important. And so I seek to share that with my daughter for sure. And whether or not she loves the natural world the way I do, that's her own journey. But at least she's developing an ease and a comfort being in the natural world. And I think that is key. And then in
Yes.
terms of Teaching, absolutely. I mean, through the years, I've led many retreats in these beautiful natural settings. And what I've always found, like in leading those yoga and meditation retreats, the nature does like 85% of the teaching. I'm just there as a support. But to watch the transformation that you see in people when they step out of their busy everyday lives and are just immersed in the mountains of Maine next to a lake, or they're out by Ghost Ranch in New Mexico, and these beautiful settings, like the nature does the work.
That is so awesome. Now, were your parents, were they into like yoga, meditation, anything like that? Tai Chi, Qigong?
Yeah, yes, yes. Definitely not the way that my path has gone, but yes, my parents absolutely have their own spiritual paths for sure. My father has meditated throughout his life and has been very interested in Native American philosophy and spirituality, as well as explored a lot of Gurdjieff studies. And my mother, I remember growing up watching her take Tai Chi classes and things like that, and
Oh,
she's explored the healing arts a lot through her life too. So yes, they brought me up with like an openness to that. They weren't like, oh, here, let's take you to this spiritual center to study. That they wasn't that kind of relationship, but I just witnessed them have their own practices and be interested in it, and I think that had an influence.
and it sounds like they introduced you to it at a young age as far as the martial arts, and it was in the woods, and you would do the Tai Chi and the Qigong.
Yes, I also offer gratitude that my parents took me out camping and backpacking. And so
Mhm.
that my love of backpacking started as a young child. We would go on trips a couple times a year. And so um, that immersion in nature was always like, very special to me. I would definitely say that the influence from my own upbringing of growing up simple and, a pretty slow life has influenced how I'm raising my daughter these days, in terms of I very much still value a spacious, not overly busy life.
Mm.
And in our fast paced world where it's so common to pack in as much as we can, I really make a concerted effort to not live our lives like this, to like have days where there aren't things on the schedule, because I feel it allows for integration in our own beings of everything we are taking in when we're interfacing with people and in our work or our school or our lives. Um, and I also will offer gratitude to Krishna, because in the 5 years that he was dealing with cancer before he passed, he said this, multiple times. He said, why be so busy? He said, why work all the time? He's like, we never know, right? How much longer we're going to be on this planet. He's like, I want to do the things that are deeply meaningful now. I don't want to wait and just say, like, after I've worked another 80-hour week. And
Right.
that really, yeah, that really had an impact on me. And I've taken that in, and it really settled into my being. And so I continue to try to impart that in my parenting and in my teaching. Like, it's so easy to get swept up in this fast paced, like overly packed, culture that we
Yes.
live in. But there's really something to be said for choosing a different way and saying, like, I'm going to have a spacious day. I'm just going to sit with this tree, and it,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Wow.
seem as alluring at first, but then the magic happens.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. Hearing that just brings tears to my eyes because he's such an amazing teacher. He was such a beautiful human. And speaking of Krishna, you and Krishna Peter are the founders of the Shiva Shakti Yoga School, where students like me learned ancient practices such as yoga nidra, meditation, and pranayama. Could you tell us a little bit about the school and the courses that you offer everybody? And they're amazing. If I didn't mention that before, they're amazing.
Yes, Krishna and I founded the Shiva Shakti School of Yoga just about 20 years ago, actually. And our goal has always been to share authentic, spirit focused yoga and meditation teachings. And when we first began the school, we were based in Maine at the time, and we had an in-person location. And for the first dozen years or so, our primary focus was on 200 and 300-hour yoga teacher certifications. And we taught those in person in Maine and at other locations in the US and also internationally, as well as different meditation retreats too. And then about 10 years ago or so, we started offering some of those courses online, and then kind of like during and after the pandemic shifted to be primarily an online entity. And so at this point, I still offer some of those courses as online offerings, such as a yoga nidra course, meditation and pranayama course, prenatal yoga training, and Ayurvedic yoga training, and other ones. And these are all like certification courses. We have a lot of yoga teachers coming to take them for continuing ed credits and so on. So thanks for asking.
Beautiful. And do you still have your meditation, your yoga nidra meditations on Amazon? Because I bought your CD a long time ago. And
Yes,
so
they're
I
still
still listen
there.
to it, and yeah, so I get to hear his voice all the time, and yours too, of course.
Yes, yes, we do. Yes, that's still available. And yeah, I have another compilation of meditations.
I'll put a link somewhere on here so that people can find your yoga nidra meditations. It's I still use it almost daily.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you and I first started talking about this episode, we had gone back and forth in our emails, talking it over. And
Mm.
you had written to me that after Krishna's passing, that you were drawn deeply, deeply into nature, and that you found that nature was one of the most healing forces when working through your grief. And I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about that, your healing journey in nature.
Yes. After Krishna passed in 2023, I went into a period of experiencing a lot of grief. And I very much wanted to be with the grief in that time. I didn't want to run from it. I didn't want to just avoid it and have it kind of be this piece that was, weighing me down for years and years to come. I said, I'm just going to be with it as much as I can now. Um, and I felt incredibly lost and unmoored and just, raw, and utilized what practices I could, received a lot of support from loved ones in all different ways, sought out different healing practices and whatnot. And simultaneously, during that time, I was seeking to support my daughter in her grief process,
Sure. Yeah.
which really looked quite different from my own, at least on the surface level. And so she was exploring different methods and whatnot. And I will say, like, not resonating with them a whole lot, like she wasn't particularly like into counseling, into grief circles, and so on. And I'm not saying that they didn't serve a purpose and they didn't
Sure.
support her. I think they were helpful, but she wasn't, necessarily drawn to go deeper with them.
Yeah.
And then there was this point after a number of months where there was a confluence of two factors. One, of an old, really dear friend of mine had come to visit and offer support. And he was also sharing about his hiking journeys. And he was in the process of doing a lot of the long trails in the US and just hiking for months and months. And that experience with another experience, I was in a yoga therapy session, receiving a yoga therapy session. And the therapist, seeming like out of the clear blue, asked me, have you considered taking a long hike with your daughter? And I kind of paused. I mean, like the sessions were not about hiking.
Yeah.
They were
You're
about
like,
like
where did
working
that
on
come
like,
from?
yeah. And but yet I feel like sometimes the divine speaks through people. And I
Absolutely.
listened and I paused. And at first my mind was like, I don't know about that. But then within like, moments, days, it was like a flash had come through and I said, this is what we need. This is what we need, And so
it turned out to be kind of overlapping the 1 year anniversary of Krishna's passing, that we went on a 15-day hike, my daughter and I and a friend. And it was profound. Like
Where
that
did you
immersion
go?
in nature. We were hiking around Lake Tahoe. There's the Tahoe
Oh,
Rim Trail.
beautiful.
And the experience was amazing. I mean, I felt like everything I had done in terms of healing in like, the year since Krishna's passing was great, but that experience was like, oh, this is what I needed. And I saw this beautiful transformation in Lalita also at the time. And what I found was like this sense of wholeness in myself that I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. And I felt the connection, like the interconnectedness with the natural world, with the universe at large, where I had been feeling so lost. I felt like, oh, here I am, here's my place again. And then just to watch like the anxiety melt away in both Lalita and I, that had been, we had been dancing with the grief. Um, it just gave me hope again. It gave me inspiration again. I felt like, oh, right, like there's reason to carry on. And not that I hadn't felt there was reason, but it just kind of like my eyes opened again.
Wow, that is such a beautiful experience. And
Mhm.
why do you think you felt that wholeness through nature? Because it's been scientifically proven that spending time in nature reduces your stress and your anxiety and everything. Why do you think it makes humans feel so, like we say, go ground in the grass and go hug a tree? I know I do that. I'm a tree hugger.
Me too.
Yeah. Why do you think nature provides us so much deep healing?
Well, in many ways, I believe we come from nature and we return to nature when we pass. We're not separate from nature. Like if in Ayurveda we talk about the five elements and how any living being is comprised of the five elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, which is space. And other traditions also talk about five elements or sometimes four elements, these many different systems, but they all, I feel like, are kind of getting at the same thing, that any living entity has these different elements in them, like different amounts of them. And so our bodies are no different. Like we have these elements that just like a tree does, just like the ocean does, just like an apple that we're going to eat. And so we're not separate. We come like biologically, like we come from the earth and we will return there. Our physical bodies aren't separate. Our minds aren't separate from the natural world. And so when we reconnect, I think we feel a sense of wholeness because we're tapping in to a very like rooted, aligned place. And when we separate, when we're not connecting with the natural world, I think this is when we experience so many imbalances, whether those are physical imbalances or mental health issues and so on. So I feel like there's so many studies these days that back this up too. If
Yeah.
we take like forest bathing, for example, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's been studied a lot in Japanese culture, and there's lots of science that shows like literally, I think there's a study that says like 3 days in the woods increases your NK cells, your natural killer cells, which work on like viral and tumor cells by 50%, just like 3 days in nature. And that lasts
Wow.
in the body for a month, right? So, I mean, there's like the little bits of science that are backing up what I think we feel naturally when we go out into the woods. Our stress hormones come down
Yeah.
and we can feel an increase in serotonin and all the positive, like happy hormones and so on, not to mention on a vibratory level when we're
Yeah.
immersed in the natural world. That impacts us greatly. Like we are
Yeah.
frequencies, all of us, everything. Everything's a frequency here. And when we step away from having a lot of artificial frequency around
Yes.
us and we immerse ourselves in the frequency of the trees and the mountains and the ocean and whatnot, that vibratory field permeates us because we're not separate, we're not cut off. And then we start to vibrate at that level and we say, wow, why am I feeling so happy? Or like, why do I just feel a sense of peace again?
Yeah.
Because we're not separate.
Yeah, and the sights and the smells and the sounds that we experience when we're in nature and the feeling of it, putting your hands in the soil and putting your bare feet on the sand or in the water when you're at the beach. We live where I live. My husband and I, we live in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we have this half acre just surrounded. Our house is surrounded by trees. It's just so incredibly gorgeous here. And every morning the sun shines through the trees, and it just by stepping outside and just looking at that and seeing the little squirrels jumping from limb to limb and the birds chirping and the whole earth is just coming alive from its slumber. It is just how can you be in a bad mood? It's just like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Yes.
and
Yes.
I notice that when I'm feeling detached and I'm feeling run down, I ask myself, when was the last time you took your shoes off and grounded outside? We live in the kind of time where we have to remind ourselves to actually stop.
We do. We do. Yes.
So when you went hiking with Lalita, that first, that big trip, did you do other practices, or did you just hike, or did you just meditate?
I have to tell you that I feel like with these long hikes, they are so much like meditation retreats to me that I feel like it's a walking meditation much of the day.
Ah,
And there were moments where I actually did like seated meditation and so on. But I often say that I feel like extended time in the wilderness is very much like a meditation retreat because you have to deal with yourself eventually. And
yeah.
there's not a lot of distractions in terms of like the alluring, like, oh, I'll look at this screen or I'll go to
Yeah.
drive to the store or whatever. You're just with yourself and the natural world. And so, you get uncomfortable sometimes, like it pours, you're cold, you're wet, your sleeping bag gets wet, or, the wind picks up and you can't sleep for the night because your tent's flapping so much, or there's bugs, any number of things. And then at some point we have to decide, like, am I going to continue to react to this with aversion, or am I going to allow it to be what it is and choose a different response internally? And I feel like this is so much like what we deal with frequently on meditation retreat. Our thoughts are coming up, our emotions are flowing, we start churning, we feel like the world is ending in our head. And then it passes, and we're like, oh, it was just a thought. And so it's the impermanency of everything that becomes very clear. And so it is with, weather and emotions are so similar. The sun's out, yay. The rain comes down, oh no.
Yeah.
Until we just say, it's a constant flux. And how do I want to choose to respond to this?
Well, we're going to be having Lalita on in a little bit, and I can't wait to hear all about how she sees it. So
Yes.
that'll be interesting. As shamanic practitioners, we know that there are spirits in nature, and so we are able to connect with them as well. So, did you want to
Absolutely.
share with that what your thoughts are on that?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, as a shamanic practitioner and in the path of shamanism, we speak a lot about the helping spirits that are around us all the time and very often in nature, sometimes in other forms. But we talk about them a lot as power animals, spirit helpers, so on. There's so many different names depending on traditions. Um, but when immersed in the natural world, I think you have a very tangible experience of that. It's like, oh, here I am, right? Like, here I am with this tree. And clearly, the tree is a living, breathing, feeling being that has so much to offer, so much to teach. when we just pause and learn to listen, right? And these aren't skills that are accessible only to a few. These are skills that are accessible to any of us.
Everyone. Yeah.
And I think if we look at a lot of indigenous traditions, it was certainly spoken of a lot in the past, and I think still currently in some traditions, where that ability to connect and to communicate with the natural world and with the spirits of the natural world was just very much a part of those traditions. And it's really no different now. I just don't think our cultures are raising us always with that same level of connectivity with the spirit world, with the natural world. But when we choose to kind of remember those skills, they're right there for us, right? That ability to really hear what the tree wants to share, or the ability to communicate with the river or with a deer or with your cat, that opens these pathways of communication.
Absolutely. Do you ever go out in nature? This happens to me when I go out in my backyard. Call me crazy, but it's like all the trees come alive when I step outside. It's like they're greeting me. But I do. I notice it all the time. Do you ever notice that?
Yeah, I think I believe that the more we tune in, the more that we see, right? And we see that connection that, yeah, the tree isn't just this like abstract object that's just there. Like, no, it's a living, breathing, feeling being. And when we recognize that in it, it then opens up more. The tree, I feel like, reaches towards us as well. So there's
Yes.
like a back and forth happening.
Just as much as we need to go out in nature, like you're talking about, it's truly an exchange, really. It's an exchange in energy. It's an exchange in energy. Do you believe that?
I do, absolutely. And I believe that there's studies like in quantum physics that really look at that, like that we're not just an objective observer. There's this real connection that the moment we begin to gaze at a tree, right, and we focus our attention, then it basically like opens up and there's like a subjective connection. There's something to us putting our attention on something that then that opens up this relationship. And so certainly when we offer love and connection and appreciation, that just, creates even more of a opening in the vibratory field between us and a tree or a bear or whatever it may be. Yes. I also will add, lately I've been furthering my studies in interspecies communication. And one of the pieces that comes up a lot is when we open up, let's say, with an animal companion like a dog or a cat, and we open up those lines of communication. Very often, what we hear from that being, that animal being, is, well, I've been waiting for you to like open up communication here. Like I've been reaching out to you, but you weren't really maybe hearing like, my communication method and so on. And it's fascinating because you realize that there is the ability for communication, not just with like our animals that live in our home, but animals in the wild, with trees, with insects, with rocks and minerals and whatnot. Yeah.
Believe that. I talk to all the animals in my backyard. We have so many species in our backyard. We have bees and we have butterflies and toads. I talk to our little toads. We have a little golden, I call him the golden prince, but he is like, he rules the backyard. Oh, and we had a snake the other day. I found a beautiful, it was probably, I think it was like a corn snake.
Yeah.
Just
Wow.
beautiful, basking in the sun. And squirrels, lots of
Yes.
squirrels. And we have,
Yes.
yeah, I
Always the
could go on
squirrels.
and on. Let's see what else. We had a hawk one day. We have owls. We have bats. The woodpeckers. Those
Mhm.
look like prehistoric. They're just they are so wild. There was
Wow.
a ton of them that were
Yes.
on our back fence, and it was so mind blowing. I couldn't believe it. And they're not normally, I don't think they usually come together in big groups, but they did that day. It was wild.
But it's just rich with life. And I feel like that often reflects that whatever's happening in the ecosystem there is very supportive to them, but also energetically and so on.
Yeah.
Like it's supportive if they're feeling drawn there. It's just like people, where do we feel drawn, you know? So
I think that's what they're drawn to is, like you said, the energy. So, Aiyana, you've spent years studying with the most remarkable teachers and immersing yourself in ancient wisdom traditions. Yet you've often spoken of nature as one of your greatest teachers in your lifetime. What lessons did nature teach you?
wow, well, so many.
Yeah.
um, I will just say that I'm so grateful to my many teachers in human form. I'll also say that humans are interesting beings. You know, they're complex, and we're complex. We have a lot of thoughts, we have a lot of emotions, we have a lot of psychological content, and many people wear a lot of masks. And what I find so refreshing in the natural world is the honesty, the directness, the um, authenticity. You just are there, right? With nature. And there's no masking, there's just here you are, right? And that I feel like the lessons are just right there when we listen, right? We don't have to kind of sift through a lot. We're like, oh, it's right in front of me, right? When we open. And I would say one of the greatest lessons that continues to come up again and again for me in the natural world is that we exist in a great mystery, that everything is not explainable. Like we can try, our minds seek that very often. Our culture seeks that to be able to explain everything, to be able to prove everything. But that's, you know, the mind is limited. It only goes so far, our thinking, rational mind. And so we try to explain things, and the mind tries to grasp onto that, gives a sense of security, a sense of safety on some level. But beyond the limitations of our thinking, rational mind is a much greater, vaster field of awareness. And there aren't really words other than there's a great mystery that exists, and we all are held in that. And I feel that very intimately when I go into the natural world. Like everything cannot be explained, everything cannot be proven scientifically. Like we can try, but
Yeah.
there's something so much vaster. And when we tap into that and we surrender that need for control, it's really, really beautiful. It's like, I mean, there aren't words really.
That is such a beautiful perspective. When you're in nature, do you ever communicate with nature? Do you ask questions? Do you ask for guidance? I'm thinking of people who might be listening that really want to connect with nature. The first thing when I think of communicating is conversing, having a conversation. And some people might say, well, you can't talk to a tree, but you can. So, do you ever do that? Do you ever ask questions? Do you ever listen and hear messages from nature?
All the time. Yes, I think you absolutely can. And for those people who aren't so sure that that's what they want to explore quite yet, lessons can come in so many ways, whether it's simply the experience of being out in the woods and being uncomfortable at times or getting dirty or bug bitten or whatever. That provides lessons without a doubt. And there's also the opportunity that if we want to ask questions, I think yes. I mean, it's not a thinking, it's a knowing. Like I absolutely converse with the natural world. And keep in mind that the responses are not always in worded thought
Right.
or speech the way we're used to as humans. I feel like communication from other species often comes in other forms. Sometimes it's just a knowing, sometimes it's through the heart, sometimes it's just like a flash or a vision. So, you know, many different ways, but it's
Yeah.
not always going to be like you ask a question out loud and then you hear this voice speaking to you.
Right. And sometimes
Yes.
I feel like it's the signs are there if we just listen or if we just look, if we stop and pause. One thing that I like to do is just ask for a sign. Just simply show me a sign that you're here. talking to whatever helping spirit,
Yes.
divine, loving,
Yes.
compassionate spirit. And then there's a hawk. How do you explain that? How do you explain that timing and that the magic that you're talking about? I think those are like,
Truly.
yeah, I think
Yes.
they're signs. It's the magic.
And I think the more that we tune into signs and symbols, um, the more we recognize them, because they are there. They're around us all the time, and that's very often how the spirit world is trying to communicate with us, like across the realms, is through signs and symbols. It's a very common way for spirit helpers and whatnot to communicate through those signs and symbols. A symbol may come, you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden you see like this name on the back of a big truck or something, or a word, and you're like, wait, that's Uncle so and so, like letting me know something, this
Yeah.
transition, things like that. So I think the symbols can come in many different forms.
So I grew up in a subdivision in the desert of Phoenix, Arizona. Unlike you, because you grew up tons of pine trees in Maine. I grew up with one pine tree in
Mhm,
Arizona
mhm.
in my front yard. It was a subdivision. And I would climb to the top each day after school. And this tree was my very best friend. And there are so many times when I think about that tree to this day, and I still get teary eyed thinking about how much, I miss that tree. And what's so sad to me, I think, is as adults, as we transition out of childhood, it's so easy to lose that connection that we have with nature. For someone who is listening, who longs for a deeper reconnection with nature, what are some simple steps that you think they can do to reconnect to nature and find their way back?
Absolutely. I like this question. I think I think a connection with nature is accessible to any of us, regardless of where we live. You don't have to live in some like gorgeous natural setting to feel a connection. You can live in a densely urban setting and look out your window at night, and even if there's smog or pollution, there's those nights where you can still see a star and you can make a connection. You might grow a plant on your balcony, and that connection with your one little potted plant is a connection to nature. Or maybe it's the pigeon that comes and lands on that balcony, and that one pigeon that you start a conversation with, right?
Yeah.
Or you just observe, or you walk to a park and you take a walk on a trail in a park. So we don't have to have all the external circumstances be like highly supportive with like, oh yeah, I live in such and such a town and there's a whole trail network right outside my door and there's beautiful mountains. You don't need that. You just have to choose. And I think this is the piece. We have to choose at some point, do we want to develop that connection?
Mm.
Do we want to nurture and foster that connection? And that takes prioritizing it. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. We don't need to go on multi-day or week backpacking trips. That might be something I love, but that's not going to be for everybody. But you have to choose, okay, I'm going to go, and for 5 minutes in the middle of my really long, hectic work day, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to, eat my lunch under this tree and recognize that, oh, the tree and I are just having a moment here, right? Or maybe it's once a week on your one day off or whatever it is, you go and you take a walk in the park for an hour and you just take in, and you take your headphones off and actually listen to the birds, and you don't talk on your phone the whole time. You just say, okay, I'm choosing to really walk with presence in this park today.
Great answer. What a great answer.
Yeah, it's accessible. This is accessible to anyone, and we have to
Yeah.
remember that. But we have to remember that we have to choose to cultivate it. It's a practice, like any practice.
Yeah. Has your relationship with nature changed the way you work with others?
Yes, my relationship with nature absolutely informs the work that I do. Um, when we talk about our beings being composed of these five elements, like I mentioned, like from the teachings of Ayurveda, we can also find this in, traditional Chinese medicine and in other paths too. When we tap into that awareness that we have these five elements in us and that they are found in all living
Yeah.
entities in nature, we realize we're not separate. And so then, absolutely, I feel like that connection with the natural world influences the work I do. So then, as I'm interfacing with people, we're talking about what do we have going on in our body? What's going on in our minds? And how is that influenced by the natural world? Have we been connecting with the natural world, or have we been separating from the natural world? And in a world where we see such a mental health crisis going on,
Yeah.
I mean, anxiety and depression and you name it are just like off the charts. And we say, well, have we put our feet on the ground and really grounded? Have we really connected? Do we remember that we are a part of the natural world, that
Yeah.
we're not separate? I think just that in itself starts to help us to ground, help us to find our sense of wholeness again, help us to find our steady core, you could say.
Yeah. Do you think that these ancient practices that you teach strengthen your connection to nature and your spiritual path?
I do, yes. Um, Many of the ancient teachings talk about being a witness, learning to be a witness, and observing our likes and dislikes. For example, um, the observing the impermanence of our feelings and thoughts, like I mentioned before. So I know that I can have strong likes and dislikes at times. Oh, I want this. Oh, I don't want that, etc. Right? And sometimes inner contentment feels very far away for me at moments. Um, and so, but these practices, many of them teach, learn how to be a witness, practice equanimity, right? Like, how can we observe what's going on around us and not immediately go into a place of high reactivity? How can we recognize that we may have a preference for one thing and, not so much for another, but not have that take over and control us? And so when I translate that into the natural world and I'm walking and it's 95 degrees in like the southern Arizona heat, and I'm like, gosh, right?
Yeah.
It's a good test of, can I be with this? Can
Yeah.
can I be with this? How am I going to choose to react today or the next? I mean, like a week ago, my daughter and I were on a backpacking trip, and it started and it was like in the 80s, and the next day it was raining, and the next day it was hailing and snowing,
Oh my
right? So the
gosh.
whole gamut. And I mean, I did have a moment of feeling like quite a bit of aversion in the midst of it, but I was watching myself have that response. And the spiritual practices have given me that of going, okay, so now I'm responding with some aversion. I'm not liking this. I'm cold right now. I wish I wasn't wet, etc. But it's not enough for me to give up, right? And that's
Yeah.
what I think the spiritual practices show is like, this is just impermanent. In a moment, it's going to shift. Weather patterns are like emotional patterns, emotions are like
Yeah.
weather, they come and they go. And the only constant is change. And we have to remember that impermanency. And then it's our choice how we want to respond.
Oh, that's great. Great advice.
Mm.
I love that. I knew that you were in Arizona and the popsicles that you guys got in Arizona. I was like, oh, I
Yes,
know that. Yep, I grew up
yes,
on all those popsicles, you know.
totally,
It's
totally.
so hot there.
Yes.
Do you believe that nature has a message for us?
Yes, I absolutely believe that nature has messages for us. It's really about opening up to communication with the natural world. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been furthering some my studies these days in interspecies communication, and there's no doubt that other species other than humans can absolutely communicate with us and we can communicate back with them. And it's not always in, worded thought the way we're communicating right now. Very often it's just like a flash or a feeling or a knowing. And I think that's how the messages come through for us very often. But we have to choose to listen and to trust what comes through. And sometimes um, it's the quiet, not very blaring message that's only said once. It's kind of like intuition. It comes through and it's just, and then you can easily discredit it. You can easily be like, that's not what I want to hear, and carry on. And then I don't feel like the natural world necessarily keeps knocking on her door saying, hey, you got to listen. It's like, if she's not going to, be responsive, receive it, then maybe it's not her time yet for that message. But I think when we open up, there's just such this rich world of understanding, of consciousness, that we can begin to experience this in so many different ways.
If nature had a voice, what do you think its one message to humanity would be? I didn't prepare you for this, so that popped in right now. So I'm looking at this tree and it kind of popped in. So
It probably comes back to that feeling of love, that we're all connected in this great vast field of love. And when we can recognize that we're all a part of that, that we're not separate, that we're not alone, that we have meaning, and that none of us are better or worse than anybody else, right? It's like there's an impersonalness to it, though, at the same time. It's like we have meaning, and yet we're not more significant than the ant. We're not as good as some great famous whoever, right? We all have our place and we all matter. And yet at the same time, we matter in this kind of impersonal way, in this big web, if that makes sense.
yeah.
And all I could say is that in that interconnected field, I feel like love is the adhesive that kind of holds us all together. Is like
Oh,
this big
beautiful.
space that we all reside within. And I feel like it's just about opening to that more and more, so that we feel held by that and feel our place in that.
Oh, that's so beautiful. What a great visual. I love that. So now we have a very special guest joining us, Lalita, also known on the trail as PJ, who has been sharing her hiking adventures through her blog. Welcome, Lalita. We're so happy that you're here.
Aw, thanks. I'm happy to be here too.
I've followed your blogging adventures and I shared it with my entire family in Arizona, and everybody just loved it so much. So, you write a blog about your hiking adventures. What made you want to start writing about your travels with your mom?
Well, I didn't want to keep all the joy and fun to myself. I wanted to share it with the world, with the people who can't have those experiences.
It's wonderful that you say that because I had shared your blog with my parents who live in Arizona. And my dad and my stepmom, they were avid hikers. They used to hike everywhere, all over the world. And now they're quite older and they don't hike anymore. And so I shared your blog with them and they truly enjoyed it because you get to go to all these great places, that some of the places they've been to, and they wrote me an email and said how much they enjoyed your adventures. So thank you for that. So now your real name is Lalita, but on the trail, you go by the name of PJ. Now, I have a couple of questions with that. So first of all, does everybody have a trail name? And where did PJ come from?
Well, to answer your first question, trail names aren't very known in other countries, but in America they are like more common. Lots of people have them. I think they're just like a fun thing.
So, where did your trail name come from?
Um, well, I was about to start this backpacking trip and I remembered that I didn't have my pajamas and I was
Oh,
like, oh no, I forgot this. And this guy was like, why don't we call you PJ? Because you don't have your PJs.
oh
And
no.
I was like, cool. So it's kind of always been that.
And so what did you do? You didn't have your PJs with you. So what did you do? Just did you have to sleep in your hiking clothes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even bring them now.
So I want to hear all about your friendships that you've made on the trail.
So friendships just kind of like they just kind of occur, and like we met this guy last fall, and we hiked it with him for 2 weeks, and we had no idea it wasn't planned. We were supposed to be hiking just the two of us, and it was a really nice experience. Um, and like one of my first through hikes was with my godfather, and my relationship with him deepened a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful. So do you meet a lot of people on the trail, just strangers, and everyone just kind of takes care of each other? They look out
Hmm.
for each other?
Yeah.
That's lovely. Do you feel like you have a close friendship with nature because you're out in immersed deeply in nature?
Yeah, Mother Nature's rough on me sometimes, but yeah,
What do you mean rough?
it's,
What do you like? Give me an example.
well,
Blisters on the
some
feet.
days, yeah, but like the weather forecast will be like 20% chance of rain. And that's like over here in like a city, it's never gonna rain. But out there, it is 100% gonna rain. And it's like, rain, well, I'm gonna be wet all day and cold.
Or the opposite. I read your blog where you were really, really, really hot and you had in
Hmm.
Arizona, which was, where I grew up. And I really felt you there, girl. I was like, oh, though you had stopped and had to get some popsicles and was it lemonade, I think you said in your blog?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
What's your favorite thing about being out in nature?
But that's easy, the simplicity. I just love how simple it is. Eat, sleep, hike, repeat over and over again.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And what would you say nature has taught you? Being out in nature, what have you learned? What are some of the lessons that you've learned?
We really start to depend on creature comforts. Like, we don't always know it, but like all the things that we have in our everyday life, AC, heat, refrigeration, showers, and then there's none of them. And you just kind of have to get used to that. Um,
And you just learn how to move through that pain. You move through that discomfort, the
yeah,
resilience.
yeah.
So I want to hear about the coolest animal encounter or the most amazing experience that you've ever had hiking in nature.
Well, the coolest animal encounter, there are kind of two. Before we did the Arizona Trail, I was like, I really want to see a horny lizard, also known as horny toads. And on the first day, we saw one, and they're little lizards about this big, and they are just really cute. And that was number one. And number two is Gila monsters.
Oh,
They're very neat.
they are very cool, but they're very poisonous.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they won't hurt you if you leave it alone. So was it tell me about it. Was it on a rock or was it just doing its thing or where was it?
We actually saw five of them over the
Oh,
course of the Arizona Trail, but we saw a
wow.
bunch walking down the trail and like just like
Wow.
they like walk across and very neat.
And they leave you alone, right? So there was five of them. Where was it like a group, a family of Gila monsters?
No, it was like the trip we were hiking for like 3 weeks. We'd see them like saw one day and then like a few days later we saw another one.
So, your mom teaches people how to be still and quiet inside. Do you ever try to do that with your mom? The meditation and the breathing techniques, do you ever do that?
Yeah, sometimes I do yoga nidra. Um, and I've recently started doing the pranayama, and I really like that one.
Do you? Which technique do you like?
The this
Alternate
one, yeah, alternate.
Shodana. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. And when you say yoga nidra, for those who don't know what yoga nidra is, it's a type of meditation that withdraws the senses. And so, how long do you do your yoga nidra practice?
Well, usually I listen to like recordings, and the ones that I was listening to are like hour and a half. They were quite long.
Wow. Do you ever listen to your mom and dad's?
Yeah,
Me
all the time.
too. Yeah, those are my go-tos. I have those on my phone. So I always just pull that up whenever I need to do some yoga nidra. Do you think young people need these kinds of practices too, or do you think it's just for grown-ups?
Oh, everybody does. Like all my classmates have like anxiety, ungroundedness,
Really?
concentration issues, and I think if they did like some sort of like everyday practice or something, it would be like so much easier for them to.
Okay, so last question. If you could take our listeners on one hike with you, where would you take us?
I think I'd take you guys up Wayu Pass in New Zealand. It was so gorgeous up there.
What was it that was so beautiful?
The New Zealand scenery is just like gorgeous in general. Like, I think it was like right after sunrise, so the sun was like coming up, and it was like I could look out on this valley. It was so beautiful. And
Oh, that sounds beautiful. How lovely. How long were you there?
the hike itself was like 2.5 weeks.
Oh, wow. So you were there for a long time. Wow, that's
Mhm.
beautiful. I think The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, I think was filmed in New Zealand, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. Have you ever seen that?
No,
No.
but I have heard that it was filmed there.
Thank you so much for sharing all about your adventures. Let's get your mom back in, and I have a couple questions for both of you. So I want to thank both of you so much for being here. I really do. But I want to ask one more question, and I ask this question to all of our guests. If you want to each answer it separately, with the inevitable rise of artificial intelligence and so many people feeling confused about their purpose and uncertainty about the future of AI, what can nature give us that artificial intelligence could never replicate?
You can go first.
Well, I think we're living in fascinating times. Like AI is intriguing to me. I'm curious about it, and I'm skeptical too, and I have my worries about it, and all that. I feel like there's when we talk about that field of consciousness or that field of love, there is a feeling state or like a deep, deep knowing at like a kind of soul level or at a spirit level that I don't think AI can ever touch. It's just not possible to feel a real deep sense of connection. Well, I feel like there's connectivity that can happen with AI and people can, like get emotional responses back through AI. I still think it's manufactured and it's not the same as like that deep, deep kind of core knowing that you feel when you exist in relation, in openness with that field of conscious awareness and love.
So are you saying, because they have those glasses that you can wear that makes you think like you're on the beach or that you're walking in nature and you're really not.
I feel like on a vibratory level, like your cells still know that it's not the same thing. I mean, it
Mm.
like what you're seeing may create certain hormone responses in your body that then affect your cells, but I think there's still a level beyond that where it can't fully be duplicated just
Yeah.
by looking at something through a screen. It's not the same as um, having that really tangible experience. And I mean, I'm
I
sure there'll
agree.
come a time when you can stand in a little box and there'll be, or maybe it already exists, like breezes blowing on you and you feel like you're in the tropics and you're looking at this screen and so on. But I don't know. I feel like it still falls short in some
Yeah.
way. There's still like a level at which um, you're not truly immersed in it. And in a world where there are so many distractions, I feel like it's an it is here to stay and we're going to be interfacing with it, but we still always have to ask ourselves, how much do I want to participate in something that's illusory,
Right.
that's like, and I feel like that on the spiritual path is a lifelong question that we ask. Like,
Yeah.
okay, how much do I want to participate in this, or that, right? And it's very easy to get swept up, but it still always comes back to a choice of like, what's real? Like, where does
Yeah.
the truth exist for us? And it takes practice and discernment, I think, to listen deeply, but it's available to us.
And I think that's a great answer because I think going back to what you were saying earlier in the episode, you were talking about how when we're in nature, I mean, not only do we smell and feel and we see nature in front of us and hear, but but I do believe that there's a spiritual exchange in some way, like that energetic, maybe that's a better way to say it. There's that energetic exchange that we have with nature that can never be replicated.
Well said. Exactly. Yes, I think on a frequency level, on an energetic level, we can't. I mean, like, even if you try to replicate all these things happening
Right.
sensory wise inside of a box, there's still a frequency that will not be able to be replicated to that.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you were saying about how every single thing that we see in nature is a living, breathing being that's alive. And so
Yes.
you just can't replicate that. What about you, Lalita? What do you think?
Well, I think AI might be like so smart and be able to come up with these feelings, but it's never the same, and I don't know if it ever will be. Hopefully not.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And what final message would you like to share with our listeners on the human community?
I invite you all to spend time in the natural world, to build a relationship, to get curious, to get out there. If you already have a relationship, beautiful. If you don't, just start with a little bit. It doesn't have to be these great wilderness immersions. I know not everybody has the space in their lives to take off for weeks at a time on hikes, and not everybody can hike, but you can sit under a tree or you can look out your window and gaze at the sky or at a bird. And I think building that connection, it helps us to feel a sense of belonging in this web of life, and it tunes us into something greater than us so we don't feel alone or separate on this journey, but we realize we're interconnected with all species and bonded by, I guess it comes back to love, like I've said earlier, right?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
all connected in this field of conscious awareness and love.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And Lalita, what about you? What's your final message for the listeners on the human community?
Well, I think it's a good idea to spend some time outside each day, even if it's 2 minutes or watering your garden. It's really good for you.
I love that. I love that. I did that this morning.
I want to thank you, Toria, for inviting us both to be on your podcast. It's been such an honor to connect with you, and just
Thank
thank you
you.
for this invitation. And
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. I love bringing people that have so much to share with the human community to remind people how to get back when we've lost that connection, how to get back into it. So, this has been such a joy to have both of you on here. Aiyana, could you let everybody know where they can find you and any events or classes that you have coming up?
sure. So I have two different websites. ShivaShaktiYogaSchool.com is where my meditation and yoga courses are offered. And then LiveYourSacredDream.com is a lot of my healing arts offerings, the shamanic healing, some other extended healing programs that I do with people. So you can check both those websites. I do have a couple of trainings coming up in the fall, a yoga nidra in October, and a prenatal yoga training actually comes before that. That's in September.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I do a lot of one-on-one work with people from all over the globe via Zoom and things like that.
Wonderful. I've taken your classes and they're amazing. So I'm so grateful for that. I've learned a lot and I use your techniques to this day. So your yoga nidra is my favorite. Like that's my go-to. I do it almost daily, like I said.
It's a powerful practice.
It really
Yes.
is. It really is. And Lalita, how can people find your blog and read all about your hiking adventures?
On the trek.co, you just search up PJ and my profile will come up.
Okay, great. Thank you both for being on here today. We appreciate you sharing your heart and your stories and your wisdom. And Lalita, I look forward to more adventures on and following your blog. So keep writing.
Will do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Toria.
Thank you.
The wild beyond. Oh, how the wilds beckon, untamed and uncivilized. The juices of great Gaia still flow, unhampered. The world of humans can feel so dry, empty distractions and tedious shoulds that fill day after day when we bow to this way. Sometimes I throw off the cloak of behaving as I was taught to, the imposed human expectations, so-called normalcy. I wander off into the woods for a while and sit with a tree, or lose myself in a vast desert expanse of sun-baked rock and prickly cacti in the never-ending sky. There, I find myself more whole, taste the meaning of this existence more clearly, hear the song of the earth soul, and feel my own life juice flow free again.